Welcome to the Cloud Pod, where the forecast is always cloudy. We talk weekly about all things AWS, GCP, and Azure. We are your hosts,
Justin,
Jonathan,
Ryan,
and Peter.
Episode 204, recorded for March 15th, 2023. Amazon eats pie with their own version of S3FS. Good evening, Ryan and Jonathan.
Hey, Justin.
Hola.
Hola. Peter is not able to join us because he's at spring training, which he did a great job telling us 5 minutes before the show recording. So he's right on top of it as usual.
Is that baseball or is that sales training?
Yeah, it depends what he's training in. Yeah. Is he trying out for the Giants? Is that where he's going? Yeah.
I think he's just attending the practices. I don't actually know what he's doing. I mean, I'm filling in the blanks. That last year he went at this time for spring training, and spring training baseball is happening now. So I assume he also is at spring training baseball, but he could be doing something else for all I know. He's a man of mystery. Maybe he's at a Greek wedding. I don't know. You never know with Peter. It's always something fun.
Learning how to crochet or something.
Basket weaving for cloud professionals. You know, it's a new cloud certification that Foghorn's trying to get. So that's how it works. All right. Well, I mean, other things you can celebrate this week was the 17th birthday of Amazon Pi Day at Amazon, where they celebrate, of course, S3, because S3 has so many .9s after its availability that they somehow find that related to Pi. And so, of course, they celebrated it with a live Twitch stream that they forgot to tell us about in advance again. So you missed it, but I think the recording is available out there on the YouTubes if you're really looking forward to it. But, of course, they covered many of the S3 technologies, but they also announced 7 new capabilities across their data services. And the first one is a bit of a surprise. Mount Point on Amazon S3 in alpha, an open source file client for Amazon S3. And this is sort of ironic after all the time arguing that object storage isn't the same as file systems and that people using things like S3FS are doing it wrong and don't know what they're doing and shouldn't do that because that's not the thing. And so now they've created an open source version of basically their own version of S3FS that translate local file storage API calls to REST API calls on objects in S3. When using Mount Point for S3, data lake applications that access objects using the file API can achieve high single instance transfer rates, saving on their compute costs. Mount Point for Amazon S3 supports sequential and random read operations on existing S3 objects. It does not support writing yet. And it also, when it does support writes, will only support them in sequential writes. So there'll be some limitations on how this thing works. Available for Linux only in alpha and is not intended for production workloads, and don't do it. And if you want to know the inside story of why they decided to build this, they have a full blog post trying to justify their change in direction, which is a pretty interesting read as well, worth checking out.
Yeah, it's been so many years of arguing against just doing like the fuse, access pattern or these things, and trying to talk people out of, the more familiar ways of accessing data in S3 and actually making the leap to object. That I was very surprised that they announced this. I did sort of suspect they might be moving that direction when they announced the strong consistency update last year. But then it didn't come for reInvent, so I was like, I guess not. But maybe it was late.
Yeah, when you read the "Why Did We Change Our Minds" article, they talk a lot about loading data into big data model sets, into machine learning, into AI, and that this just became a much easier thing versus having to force an application that maybe you didn't write to be to do S3 get objects. So this was a good way to keep people from being able, to prevent people from having to reinvent the wheel. And they said this was just a way to make data training faster and simpler and easier. And so we'll see where it goes. I think it'll be interesting to see if they see a lot of adoption for this and a lot of interest, and if it changes their tune more, or if this continues to be very specific to read. They also talk about some of the things they'll never implement in the API or in the S3, in this particular thing. Things like being able to change the directory structure because of the amount of S3 puts and gets that requires to do that. So they talk about some limitations they'll never be able to fix just because it's not a POSIX operating system. But again, a lot of these use cases, a simple read-write use case to a file directory, can work in a lot of web apps.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's what S3FS should have been all along. I think they went a step too far and tried to make S3 behave like a regular file system. If they'd limited scope just like this, it would have been a lot more successful. And I can see why they've done it now, because if you think about HPFS, that presents itself as a POSIX file system. And what they want to do is they want S3 to be a replacement for H3FS for these big data jobs. So it makes complete sense.
Yeah. I think that's the big difference between, the S3FS is the use case, right, is different. Like people were trying to replace it as their network attached storage. So they had to have all those things, but just replacing, a Hadoop file system, easy peasy.
Yep.
So.
The next thing they announced at Pi Day was the AWS Data Exchange for S3 is now generally available. This enables you to find, subscribe to, and use third-party data files for faster time to insights, storage cost optimization, and simplified data licensing management, and more. Eventually Amazon will learn how to start talking about this in terms of sustainability. They're not there yet, but not copying your data multiple times requires less storage and less power and less cooling, and that's a thing. And so this is also great for accessing that third-party data as well.
I thought they already had that. Maybe that was Google that had that a while ago. I remember we talked about availability of like geodata and map data and all kinds of stuff like that, which was easier.
Yeah, so Google has it. AWS has it as well, just not directly from S3. So you could subscribe to it, and then you'd have to go basically get the object and download it and put it into your own S3 bucket. This now avoids all of that hassle.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. S3 multi-region access points now support replicated data sets that span multiple AWS accounts. So if you have a need to have access points that talk to multiple accounts, and so you have maybe a DR account that you want to have separated out for data protection reasons or for ransomware attacks, you can now do that using the S3 multi-region access point.
I mean, that's super useful because it was having the VPC access point for S3 was really good for applying policies and enforcing use of sort of the cheap and fast way of getting the data instead of through the public route. But it was always limited to just the region you're in, and it's such a pain because then the application has to be aware of where it is and where the data is. And I think this kind of takes that away now. Now the data can be wherever you configure it to be, and the app doesn't see that at all.
Yeah, they specifically called that out in the press release that avoiding the need for complex request routing logic in your app.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if it would. I bet money that you can't actually use this from the internal VPC endpoint, but a globally replicated endpoint. But just because I remember when that first was announced, there was definitely some shortcomings there. But for anything that's going through a normal access, not directly through your VPC, like this is definitely a fantastic addition.
Then the next one up on Pi Day announcements was aliases for S3 Object Lambda access points as a CloudFront origin. So you can now use S3 Object Lambda access points aliases as an origin for Amazon CloudFront distribution to modify the data requested. An example of how you might use this is you can dynamically transform an image depending on the device that a user is visiting from, such as a desktop or a smartphone, or convert to things like WebP, which would be a really great use case that I look forward to someday in the future for even the CloudPod website. Supporting WebP is kind of a pain in the ass.
That's a weird use case they gave, because you would think that at least if you were going to resize it, you do it once and then store it in S3 for next time, so you didn't have the expense of the compute the second time. I think of other use cases, things like watermarking documents that get downloaded by clients on download, so that if something gets leaked or made publicly available, you know exactly the source of the leak.
Yeah, it's interesting because it's coming from CloudFront, so you would assume that if it's already done the resize, it would just cache the resized version. But now you're not paying for the S3 storage layer, I guess. Yeah, it is an interesting use case, because that is a good point. Like, why not just do it once and be done with it? So yeah, interesting. Just scanning through the more detailed articles, if they talk about creating your cache policy tied to the object Lambda, your width and heights. Yeah, they don't really talk about that.
I'm trying to think of the use case that I built some automation around in a much earlier previous life, was the resizing of images for thumbnails presenting, right? And so I can see how something like this would be super useful, but I wonder if the use case is written this way because you wouldn't want to get rid of that original image in that case, right? You'd still want to be able to serve that, or direct object.
Yeah, it says the first invocation with a specific size is processed by the Lambda function, and further requests the same width and height that are served from the CloudFront cache. Yeah, so they are delivering it from the cache after the first resize operation. So again, if you don't know, I guess in that scenario, if you have 10,000 images, and you don't know what images people are going to use regularly, this would allow you to potentially maybe save some costs because you wouldn't need to store multiple sizes of that image. You'd only have to store it, and you'd only be storing it in the cache when it's needed. So yeah, I don't know. It'd be an interesting ROI spreadsheet.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Because that was exactly the use case I had. We had to create 4 different copies of the thing, and then life cycle the individual objects by how frequent they were accessed. So like get rid of the raw, because it was raw data or for images. It was very expensive.
And you don't pay for it when it's in the cache either, which is kind of neat, because imagine you've got a picture you've taken, of something across the street, and some terrible thing happens in the news, and that picture's linked to by media, newspapers, goes on Reddit, goes on Hacker News, anything.
Mm-hmm.
All of a sudden, the consumer of that media could specify a new size, and then 10,000 people could request the object, and it's cached. It doesn't cost you anything in storage, and it's right on the edge. That's kind of, I guess. I think they've milked the image resizing thing now. I think that's what they use for Lambda, for the object creation, automatically resizing it and putting back, and
It's a common problem that people have to deal with.
Yeah. It's understandable too, right? Like it's been solved a lot of times.
Next up is simplifying private activity for on-premise networks with the VPC interface endpoints for Amazon S3, now offering private DNS options that can help you more easily route Amazon S3 requests to the lowest cost endpoint in your VPC. So it's basically, in the on-premise world, talking to your S3 would typically hit the public endpoint because you couldn't specify a DNS thing. Now with the private DNS option, you can specify your internal lower cost endpoint. So you're not crossing the public-private zone and paying egress fees. So that's nice. Local Amazon S3 replication on Outposts. Again, I don't know anybody who uses Outposts or why you would want this feature, but hey, you have it if you need it. And then the final announcement was Amazon OpenSearch Security Analytics, which will enable your security operations team to detect potential threats quickly while having the tools to help you with security investigations on historical data, all with lower data storage costs, killing one more reason to pay for the production Elasticsearch license.
Yeah, that's a super cool feature. I missed that in the read-through. It was one of those things I never even played with the Elasticsearch offering because it was so expensive and sort of impractical to roll out. That, like even with my interest and my, checkbook already out, I still didn't do it.
Yep. It's expensive, Mm-hmm. All right, well, let's move to GCP. Google has announced their annual I/O conference for developers will take place on May 10th near its headquarters in Mountain View, but it will involve only a limited live audience and will be open to everyone online, which is the going trend for developer conferences these days. The full agenda and schedule will be published in the next few weeks, but if I were to be a guessing man, I'm going to say it's going to be a lot of AI. AI, as well as probably the announcement of the new Nexus phone for Jonathan's purposes, because Ryan and I are iPhone people. But Jonathan will be happy with the new Nexus phone. So
yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah. Pixel phone. Nexus was the old one. Pixel phone.
Whatever they call it now. I can't be bothered with Android.
Whatever it is, my wife will want one.
Oh, they did say that an Android tablet might be coming, which that sort of intrigues me because, as little as I use my tablet, a low-cost version of a tablet is pretty optimal.
Mm-hmm.
So, there's rumors about foldable phones too. What do you think about foldable phones?
I am not on board yet on the foldable phone bandwagon. I keep seeing the Samsungs, and all I can think of is I'm going to have a quarter or a rock get stuck between those two pieces and just scratch the crap out of it. Yeah. I scratch my phone as it is now, and it's a flat piece of glass in my pocket. So couldn't imagine having it folded.
Get off my lawn.
Yeah, I just imagine the sand and the dirt and the dust, getting there and the crack in the fold, and just no.
And I can only imagine, like any fold in anything is a repetitive stress point, right? And so it's like it feels like it's got built-in planned obsolescence, or it's going to have a high failure rate where I just don't want to deal with that.
I mean, considering I replace my phone every year, it probably doesn't matter for me. But for you, who doesn't replace your phone every 5 years, a much bigger factor for you, Ryan.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm every 2 years to be fair. But the foldable phones is what the trend is though is that you have this great foldable screen to make it smaller and thicker, but then you put a screen on the outside to discourage people from actually having to open it in the first place. So yeah, it's like tech for the sake of tech, I think.
Yeah, I keep seeing the Samsung ones, and I'm intrigued because the technology has gotten better since the first version, which was horrible and had to be recalled. But I know Apple's rumored to be doing it, and I'm sure sure I'll change my mind when Apple gets it because I'm an Apple fanboy, and I'll have to have the Apple foldable thing. But I'm not really looking forward to that day.
I made the same argument against the watch, and I'm like completely addicted to having my watch now. So I'm probably gonna eat my words as well.
I do love the watch. Yeah.
Like, who needs a screen on their wrist? I already have the phone. Doesn't make it.
Well, speaking of AI, Google also announced that AI for developers in Google Workspaces has launched several new capabilities to help developers with all your AI projects. First of all, is generative AI support in Vertex AI is now available. Generative AI in the App Builder, and a new AI partnership and programs are available to you to start leveraging today to help accelerate your AI initiatives. There are new capabilities for Workspace, which for those of us who don't remember that Workspace is Google Apps every time, like myself, it does make it easy. As a starting to a new Gmail or Google Doc, it'll, based on the topic and draft, will instantly generate a template for you. Hello, my name is Clippy. It appears you're writing a Google letter.
Yeah. This better go right, because it can go wrong so many ways, and it's just going to make people very angry.
Indeed. I like the idea of it, but again, like how it gets implemented is where all the devil is in those details. Mm-hmm. Like, am I asking you to help me with a letter, or are you just offering the suggestion?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I still got some like memes from the 90s when Clippy was around, and the Clippy pops up. He's like, "Would you like to annoy you constantly, occasionally, or when you least expect it?"
Or just very frequently. Yeah.
Actually, I've been using, speaking of the AI stuff, and this is relevant to the code generation thing, I've actually found a really good use for things like ChatGPT, and that is in practicing to write really good stories for engineers. Because once you can kind of hone down exactly what you're asking for, you can paste it into ChatGPT and see what it does. If it doesn't quite do it right, revise what your ask is and ask again. And it's actually made me realize that that there's some very easy mistakes to make, and there's assumptions that people make, which I think you could actually train yourself to not make with a bit of practice.
Yeah, I'm kind of finding the same thing, which is the negative results are the informative results. Like, it's informing me of the input, right? Like, if I ask it to write a bit of code, it's not going to write a bit of functional code, but what it is going to create is, me describing the code in a much clearer way as I try to go run it through the exercise.
Yeah, so the announcement for ChatGPT 4 yesterday I watched, which was an hour-long presentation, and some of it was quite mind-blowing. I mean, the guy literally had a mock-up of a website on a piece of paper he drew in pencil, took a picture of it and said, "Turn this into an HTML page," and it did. It rendered the page in HTML with clickable JavaScript buttons and everything. It's just unbelievable.
Cool. The data that I saw that was interesting was they were showing its success rate against all of the major standardized testing, and basically it aces all of them, including the bar.
Nice. I cannot wait to tell my wife that. That's going to be awesome.
Yeah. Your wife will be super happy that she spent all that time on the bar.
Yeah.
Just wait. In the future, there'll be like AI priests and things.
Right.
Belief. Belief is a service.
That's right. I just saw a trailer for some new show coming out on, I think, Prime or something, but it's a nun who is, the AI, she's trying to stop an AI, and everyone takes orders from the AI. It looks very intriguing. So a little cross of religion and AI technology coming in the TV universe on April 20th. No sponsorship. I don't even know if we have the right network though. So good luck to you.
8/7 Central.
Yeah. Moving on to Azure, Microsoft tells us that the agricultural industry is at a turning point, and while food may seem plentiful in many global regions, the number of people going hungry has continued to increase over the last 9 years. And to feed growing populations, sustainability and efficiency, the way the food is produced must change. And so they've created Microsoft Azure Data Manager for Agriculture, now in preview. What began as a humble beginning with Project FarmBeats, an ambitious initiative to collect and transform agricultural data, is now evolved into a timely commercial solution they can charge a lot of money for. They'll help you maximize your crop yields, harvest your livestock, and get to market faster and more sustainably into the future. So that's lovely. Microsoft, thanks to the
rewind a couple of years to reinvent, and AWS are talking about the same thing. They have their IoT and the refrigerated trucks. Mm-hmm. and Werner's series on whatever he's doing anymore. I don't know. Is he still doing that series where he walks the earth doing random
He's still
stuff?
doing it, but we stopped talking about it after the third episode because they were so boring. We couldn't sustain it as a segment. So the now go build.
The Roti Maker kind of put you off finally.
Yeah, the Roto. I think it was the one after the Roti Maker that really turned me off to it, but I don't remember what that was. But I have seen them occasionally in the Amazon YouTube feed, and I've skipped every one of them since. So I can't be bothered.
I mean, it's an interesting problem, right? And there's good data that you can get some really clear answers, and it's a problem that's been around for hundreds of years that people have been trying to solve. You think about the old Farmer's Almanac, like it's the exact same sort of issues and data that people are sort of collecting and gathering. So it's cool. I like this.
Yeah.
So just there's 3 seasons of Now Go Build.
3 seasons.
I have no idea.
Looks like the first season was 5 episodes. Season 2, I don't know how many there were. The website, if this is terrible. But apparently the last episode was digital humans learn how to face-to-face interactions are inspiring more meaningful connections between humans and machines. That's great. Thanks, Martin.
Yeah, the food thing is interesting because although the trend may be that people are going hungry, if you look at the amount of waste in the industry, even the waste by the time you get to the consumer is just ridiculous. It's like 60% of food goes in the trash instead of being consumed. So maybe we should look at fixing that too.
Yep. A lot of waste in the food system, for sure. Azure is previewing powerful and scalable virtual machines to accelerate generative AI and to burn your wallet much, much faster. The new Indy H100 V5 VM, which enables on-demand sizes ranging from 8 to thousands of NVIDIA H100 GPUs interconnected by an NVIDIA Quantum 2 InfiniBand network. Customers will see significantly faster performance for AI models over their last generation of the Indy A100 V4 VM. I could not even find pricing on this, but I can tell you that if you put 100 GPUs on your box, you're going to pay a lot of money for that.
Yep.
Yeah. I would assume this is not for the average consumer.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, this is definitely not for the average consumer. I did sort of like the idea that that InfiniBand has been branded to NVIDIA Quantum 2. Because I was reading through it, I was like, is that quantum computing now in the storage layer? And then it was at InfiniBand, and I was like, oh, you just corrupted the name. Thanks.
When I use quantum dishwasher tablets, but branding's everything.
Yeah, exactly. The fun thing about these is that they have the most amazing GPUs you can buy, and this massive throughput, and then they're like, and the 4th gen Intel Xeon scalable processors. I'm like, oh, great, thanks for coupling it with a 4-year-old CPU. Appreciate that.
Yeah, to be fair, it is impressive tech though, because they're up to like 1.6 petabits a second, which is fairly impressive for a switch fabric.
Yeah, that's pretty crazy. That's a lot of data.
Yep. Have you been waiting months and months to hire your new AWS, GCP, or Azure architect, only to have them be poached at the 11th hour by a startup with a juice bar? Initiatives stalled because you're having trouble hiring? Well, I have a simple solution: Foghorn Consulting. Foghorn Consulting provides top-notch cloud engineers to the world's most innovative companies and can be burning down your DevOps and cloud backlogs as soon as next week. Foghorn-certified AWS, GCP, and Azure professionals are armed with infrastructure as code, and from day one will be designing performant, optimized cloud-native or hybrid environments that deliver on the promise of cloud. Their FogOps solution even provides on-demand cloud engineering to augment your existing teams. Visit www.foghornconsulting.com or send an email to cloudtalentnow@foghornconsulting.com and tell them the CloudPod sent you. Your dedicated FogOps team is with you for the long haul, and they bring their own juice.
All right, let's move on to our last Azure story. ChatGPT is now available on Azure OpenAI service in preview. We mentioned this when they announced the OpenAI service a few weeks ago, that ChatGPT would be coming very soon, and now it's here, priced at only 2/100th of a penny per 1,000 tokens, and the billing for all ChatGPT usage begins March 13th. So I wonder if my sandbox on OpenAI is going to start charging. But looking forward to it. That's not that too bad, actually. I think for 1,000 tokens, again, I don't remember exactly how token translates to a question, but it's a pretty reasonable one-for-one from what I remember. So
a word in a question or an answer is a token, basically.
Yeah. So I mean, 1,000 tokens, for basically less than a penny.
Yeah.
Doesn't seem too bad.
I'm super impressed by how quickly this has been turned into a commercial product, though. I mean, announcing it in preview is one thing, but less than 2 months later, actually turning it into something that you can consume and be billed for is quite a turnaround. I would assume it's been quite some time in the making.
Yeah, I mean, OpenAI has been around only for 5 or 10 years, 5 to 6 years, something like that, and they built this whole thing. But it seems like they're expecting people are going to use a lot of tokens because I keep hearing about how expensive all the compute is for ChatGPT, and for it to only be less than a penny for 1,000 it seems cheap. So I'm sort of curious, is this a money loser for them that they still just want to do, or is it going to be profitable for them to make money? I don't know.
I think it's a scale thing. You run a AI bot on your website, and tens of thousands of people use it every day. I suppose it all adds up.
I was going to say, I wonder if it's a barrier to entry sort of problem, right? Like the amount of compute it takes to do something like this for, in Azure is huge and does cost a lot. But once they've made that and they can distribute that across, thousands of users and millions of requests, maybe it balances out. I don't know.
Yeah.
Or they're just trying to get us hooked in.
It's not something that you're going to spin up by yourself and run on your own infrastructure. And it's not something that's going to be, serverless in the sense that you could spin it up on demand because it has to load 800 gig of data in to run the model. And so, this is going to be permanent infrastructure running someplace. And these are all, sort of timeshares, I guess. Priced for rapid adoption, I think, is the name of the game.
Great. All right, Oracle. I have a story about revenues. I'm not going to play the sound because my ears can't handle it today. But and since they don't have the decency to close the books near the rest of the cloud providers, they're just not going to get it. But it doesn't matter ultimately because they did miss Wall Street expectations on revenue by a whisker, as it reports its fiscal third quarter 2023 results. Net income for the quarter was only $1.9 billion compared with the prior year of $2.32 billion, and revenue for the quarter was $12.4 billion. Operating expenses jumped 37% for the year prior because of all those Oracle Cloud garages they're building. And there's a quote from the CEO. Our strong quarterly earnings growth was driven by 48% constant currency growth for the total revenue of our two cloud businesses, infrastructure and application, she said. And Oracle's cloud business now exceeds $16 billion in annualized revenue. Growth of 20% is great, but loss of profitability of 20% lower earnings per share, not so great. So all eyes are on fourth quarter for Oracle.
Yeah, they're still forecasting 50% growth by next year. It's kind of...
They apparently aren't living in the same economy you and I are living in. So
they must already have the lawyers on deck.
Yeah, they're like, we're going to hit this number through lawsuit or hook or crook. So find out they're the real secret behind ChatGPT all this time. They're going to come after you for licensing. All right. Well, that's it for new news this week. Let's move on to our Cloud Journey series. And this is our final part on migrations. We're going to cover the cloud tools from the hyperscalers to help you with your migration and just kind of talk about some of those real quick. And then talk a little bit about whether you should outsource your migration or what the benefits of that could be. Peter's not here to defend the why you should migrate side, so we'll try to do our best Peter impression. But we'll get there. So AWS is kind of the beginning place. They've been in this market the longest. I'd say they have the most tooling available, and we talked about a lot of tooling they've even announced in the last few years through acquisitions. But some of the big highlights for me are the migration evaluator to actually help you build a data-driven business case for migrating to AWS. Imagine that. AWS app discovery services are pretty great. And then, of course, database migration service is probably the other big one that most people hear about, which is really driving your database from on-prem to cloud, but it also has many capabilities, including moving you from something like Oracle to Postgres or SQL Server to Postgres, which are all pretty great. But quite a few tools. Any thoughts on the tools from Amazon here?
I think the data sync tools are nice because that's something that everyone has to invent, and it's one less thing to have to worry about on cut over day.
Yeah, I mean, it's a hard problem to solve, right? In doing it right in a consistent manner anyway. And then, these tools are great enough that I've even used it for DR and backup purposes, pretty easily before they had, more native tools doing that. And I'm sure it's the same technology under the hood. So it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. Some of the Amazon has some specialty ones too. SAP mainframes for AWS and Oracle and AWS. But one of the things that they were really the beginner of was the Snow family of products, which is really the, here's a hard drive to ship your data to us because you can't move data faster than on a truck. When you can put it all on thousands of gigabytes or terabytes or petabytes into a truck and ship it. That's pretty fast data transfer considering wire speeds these days. And then the other one that was interesting on the list too was the transfer family. They considered the transfer family to be part of their migration tooling strategy, which is not how I see SFTP services, but hey, I appreciate Amazon saying it.
I mean, it's been a thorn in the side of every migration I've been a part of is, how are we going to operate FTP securely in the cloud? So I kind of get it.
Yeah. So GCP has a bunch of tools as well, and they have a couple that I think are interesting as well. So they do have a common unified platform for Migration Center to track your overall migration strategy. I don't know why we don't use that at the day job, but just learned about it. Of course, they have some specialty tools like BigQuery Data Transfer Service, which helps you move your data to BigQuery because they can charge lots of money for that. So that makes sense. They do have a database migration tool, which just migrates you to Google Cloud databases at a global scale. And they also have a database migration service very similar to AWS's. And then they have a transfer appliance as well. They just call it the transfer appliance because Google's boring at naming, which is a ruggedized server to collect and physically move data from field locations, limited connectivity, or from data centers for ultra low cost data transfers. They do have a storage data transfer service as well. And then I remember seeing at Google Next many years ago with Ryan, as we were gawking at all the lights, and they started presenting migrate to containers. They actually have a pretty clean migration to container program that actually move your application from a physical server or VM to a container. I've yet to use this. It's on my wish list to do, but allegedly it works really well. I've heard positive things. They also have a migration to virtual machines capability as well as SAP specialties. And then a bunch of modernization frameworks available to you as well for all things like data centers, data lakes, mainframes, etc. that gets into specific best practices.
I totally forgot about that tool because I remember I think they announced that it supported .NET out of the gate. And
it did, yeah.
And I still to this day go, no. Like maybe some limited use cases or, as long as it's the .NET Core framework or, like I want to know because it's so hard to get that on just other servers sometimes. Like it's kind of awesome that they can just put it in a container.
Yeah, we should take a look at that because it seems they seem to make some very large promises about migrating apps from running VMs into containers.
They did make some big promises. So I'd love to actually use it and try it out and see how it works out. But my guess is that it's probably like converting a Word doc to an HTML page. Like, yes, it's HTML that works
technically,
but it's not clean and it's not easy to modify afterwards. Azure actually had a very few tools. I was surprised about this. Azure Migrate, of course, is a unified single dashboard for migration. Apparently, that's a thing that all the third-party vendors have. Azure Site Recovery, which really specializes in specifically the DR use cases that you may have. They do have a database migration service, which really is not about moving you to different things, but just moving your data to their managed services. And then the mercilessly mocked data box here at the CloudPod to help you move your data between Azure and your on-prem environments. And then they have they highlighted their Microsoft cost management tooling as a big part of their migration toolbox to help you make sure you're not overpaying for all your migration needs.
Yeah, it's like, look how much more expensive it would be if you moved these licenses to a different cloud provider.
Well, I mean, and that is a big part of their play. They have a huge advantage there if you're running Windows or Microsoft SQL workloads. Like it's genius, actually.
Yeah, I was just looking at Windows 2012 is reaching end of life in October, and so we're working on some plans of getting some boxes retired out of the system, and I was looking at the end of life announcement. They're like, well, but if you want 3 more years, you can just put it on Azure and you'll get 3 more years of support and security updates for Windows 2012. And I'm like, it's well played. So, but they did figure out they can make money on that because they now offer a new enhanced security update service that they'll charge you for if you're on software assurance. So they can now, because they had to update the security stuff for the Azure side anyways, they might as well now sell it to you for extra money. Well played, Microsoft.
Oh, so they can sell it if you're not an Azure customer. Nice.
Yes. Make money on both sides.
Not entirely surprised that there are a whole lot more migration services available from everyone except Azure, because I guess if you're already in the ecosystem, then it's a no-brainer to move to Azure. But who really wants to migrate their workloads there unless they absolutely have to?
Well, Microsoft shops like to move their data there, but I mean, the next one has even less, which is OCI. They don't even have a section on their website called migration like the other three. So, I had to go search around. And so, they said they have custom and third-party app modernization migration strategies. They've got ISV apps and SaaS modernizations. They got data and database migrations. And then they have a special one, MySQL HeatWave migration, where they get you onto MySQL HeatWave for lots of money, all available to OCI customers. So, not a lot of help from OCI. I'm sure they're going to partner you to a third party on the OCI side of the house.
Yeah, it's a lot to manage for anybody though, and I appreciate the tooling they provided to kind of in lieu of a project manager to help you keep track of those things like the migration hub or the migration center. But ultimately, I think any medium to large size migration, you shouldn't do this alone. You really need somebody with expertise in migrations.
Are you segueing us, Jonathan?
I am.
Well done. So like my net of that was that all we just talked about was really confusing to you, and you have no idea what we just talked about, and you're trying to contemplate your AWS migration. Yeah, partners can be your best friend, like Foghorn, and they can help you really navigate the system. They've got a lot of experience with these tools, helping you plot out your migration program. They can help you with ROI. They can help you with TCO analysis. They can do a lot of things. They also can get you more attention from the vendors, because if you're a little, Amazon in particular is bad about this, where we're going to be spending $100,000 today, but in 2 years we're going to be spending $10 million a month. Amazon doesn't give a crap about you because you're only spending $100,000 today. It's not about what you are in the future to Amazon. It's about what you are today. And so it's sometimes hard to get that attention. And so a partner can help you adjust some of those expectations. And that's why Google and Azure have some success against Amazon, because they come in and they realize the true long-term value of the customer, not the immediate short-term value of the Amazon approach.
Yeah, I think for some specific use cases, it's very worthwhile going with partners who've worked closely with the vendors in the thinking about things like SAP. It's worth working with a partner like Proterra, who we interviewed for TCP Talks a while ago. In migration to the cloud, because there are the right way to do things, and certainly the wrong way to do things. It can be very expensive.
There's lots of wrong ways. So if you'd like to not learn those wrong ways yourself the hard way, you can get that partner can help you avoid some of those too, which is a big plus. All right. Well, I think that's where we wrap up our migration series. If you guys would like us to talk about something, ping us on our Slack team or send a message to pod@thecloudpod.net with your suggestions for what you'd like to hear us talk about next. We've got a list, so if you don't come to us with ideas, we'll make you suffer with another one of our choices. We'd love to hear from you how you felt about the CCOE series and now the migration series. We'd love to talk about many, many more things, but what are you interested in? What are your challenges? Let us know at the Cloud Pod. Have a great week, you guys.
See you later.
Bye, everybody.
And that is The Week in Cloud. We'd like to thank our sponsor, Foghorn Consulting. Subscribe on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts, and tweet us your feedback at #TheCloudPod. Or join our Slack channel. Go to our website, thecloudpod.net, for sign-up instructions. Something happened in Silicon Valley last week, you guys. A bank failed. The biggest bank in Silicon Valley, 16th largest in the United States, apparently. Silicon Valley Bank.
Shocked to find that out.
Yeah, by this time, when we recorded last week, it was just starting to become a thing, and then it failed on Friday, and then it got taken over by the government, and now it's back up and running. But it's still not over, because even today, Wednesday, at the 15th, there's still banks in trouble. First Republic Bank is still suffering in stock. I saw a UK bank today, I think, was suffering as well. But overall, as a millennial, I'm starting to really hate reliving all the 1920s failures repeatedly. It's pandemic, and now bank failures. Second financial crisis potentially on the verge. Recessionary headwinds. It's really getting kind of old. I don't know about you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm thinking about packing up and heading out west to farm grapes instead.
The Dust Bowl soon. Yeah,
there's the Dust Bowl is what's next, right? Yeah, great.
Locusts at some point. And trying to think of other plagues that have happened. World War II. Nuclear bombs. There's all kinds of fun things we can repeat that I really wish we didn't. So 2008 was a very similar type of event where The catalyst for the big 2008 crash was Lehman Brothers crashing, and everyone was very quick to say that SVB is not the same thing as Lehman Brothers, and it's not a fundamental issue. But it's been sort of fun to kind of watch them, talk about how they failed and why they failed, and come to find out, regulation sort of matters in a bank, and when you go and get protections and restrictions and regulations removed by the president. Your bank fails when things get tough, when interest rates start climbing. And so these lower regionalized banks are struggling pretty badly in potentially because of last administration making changes to regulations, which is not great.
Yeah, I mean, really, it was a run on the bank that kind of caused the problem. If there hadn't been a run on the bank because of the knee-jerk reaction to the announcement that they had such a loss because of their terrible investment in bonds, it wouldn't have been an issue immediately.
That's not the first thing, though. Yeah.
I mean, the bond thing isn't really a problem per se, right? The issue is that, because the bank had a problem, right? We had a ton of deposits coming in during the pandemic. Startups were booming. They cater heavily to startup businesses. They can save money, and they'll save money to extend runway as long as they can. And so they invest that money into, bonds with a 1.8% return rate, basically. And then as the interest rates have climbed, the bond return now is 5%. So the reality is that not recapitalizing that money into a higher rate bond is losing them money. So you have to go sell those bonds to go buy new bonds at the higher rate. And because they're, of course, at 1.8%, you have to take a discount and you take a loss. They take a $1.8 billion loss. They had to go raise $2 billion in capital. They announced that publicly the same day that I think it was Constellation basically imploded from crypto investments they had made as a bank. And the stock market got spooked. And then Peter Thiel and the Founders Fund basically said, pull your money and run for the hills. And then it just kind of falls apart very quickly from there. But the biggest issue, at least what I've seen, is their communication was terrible. They should have lined up funding for the $2 billion raise they needed to do before they announced it. And then the fact that they didn't hedge their risk on those bonds, because typically a bank will hedge the risk with another type of investment mechanism to basically protect that in case the interest rates do climb. And now you're stuck with low yield bonds that you need to sell on the market. They should have hedged that, and they didn't. So those are the two big major issues. And then Peter Thiel, being Peter Thiel, you had to wonder, like, what did he have against Silicon Valley Bank now that he's moved it to Austin and gotten out to California, that he told all of his investments to basically flee and cause that run.
I mean, I'm not so convinced that he's that nefarious where he's, it's that pinpointed thing. Like, I think it's much more likely that he's just making knee-jerk reactions and statements that have wide-ranging impacts.
I mean, he could be.
The irony is SVB was trying to do the right thing in getting their balance sheets a little bit more balanced so that they had money in case there was a run on the bank, which caused the run on the bank. Like, it is really sort of an interesting situation where, I think if they had been a little less above board, they could have probably weathered this storm. But
yeah, I guess if they'd hedged their risk or they'd properly reached out to investors in advance. Apparently, though, in back off, in Wall Street, they have been concerned about the bank's balance sheet for a while. But I was looking at the analysts' opinions about the bank prior to this happening, and they weren't really downgrading them at a level that would make you think there was a major concern. So, there's definitely some parts of the system that seem like they failed. It'll be an interesting case study in some textbook in about 10 years about how not to communicate things. And, maybe pay attention to the fact that another bank just failed because of crypto. Maybe you shouldn't talk about any potential chance of you failing on the same day.
I think that the funniest thing I've seen come out of this whole thing is the photoshopped Spirit of Halloween poster on the SVB building.
Oh, that's brutal. That's pretty good, though. Whoever did that, my hat's off to you. That's pretty great.
I love some of the hot takes that are really terrible in this as well. Like, I don't remember which Republican senator or House congressional person was out there saying, well, it's because Silicon Valley Bank was too woke. And I'm like, what does that mean? And then he goes on to talk about all their ESG investments and, ESG things they were doing for environmental sustainability and growth. And I'm just like, wow, that's a far stretch. This is a pure capitalization risk mistake. And you're saying it's too woke. Like it's such a weird weird time in politics that we're in these days.
Yeah, it's
But luckily,
not about the accuracy.
Yeah, not high in accuracy. Luckily, the bank, the federal government stepped in and guaranteed the depositors that their money would be safe, and shareholders lost their shorts. But that's the risk of shareholders. That's why you pay those money. So I don't have any bad feelings for the shareholders who lost their money, but I'm glad the startups that all have payroll and a lot of things over the weekend were trying to figure out floats for their money that was stuck in Silicon Valley Bank came out of this relatively whole. So that would have been a really, the 120,000 people who've been laid off this year would have been much, much worse.
Yeah.
if Silicon Valley Bank actually had failed completely.
Yeah. No, I mean, that was the reaction to swoop in and sort of take control of all the assets and then guarantee the funds above and beyond what the FDIC has already insured, and within 48 hours. Like, governments don't move that fast, man. That was pretty spectacular to avoid a pretty nasty economic disaster.
I mean, the FDIC is actually, I think, one of the better running parts of the banking system, and the government and oversight committee, right? Their process, because banks fail not on an unregular basis, right? It does happen.
Mm-hmm.
And, they have a pretty clean process where they come in on a Friday, shut down the bank, basically lock the doors, retain the people they need to keep the bank moving. And then they find another player to buy the assets to keep the bank basically afloat. And that's worked tremendously well. I mean, Lehman Brothers got sold in a fire sale to Morgan Stanley, I think, or not more, or was it Chase? I don't remember, because it's 2008 is a decade ago. But, that was, they do a really good job. And if you really need to learn about the FDIC and read up on it, it's a really interesting organization and protection mechanism that exists in the U.S. monetary policy.
Yeah. And I mean, this exercised it to a very public and grand scale. And so if anything, I think it just speaks to maybe, getting more resources poured in that direction and raising the rates of which they can insure. So it's pretty awesome.
Yeah. I don't know anything else about Silicon Valley Bank. We're definitely not investors or people you take financial advice from. So our knowledge is cursory from what we've read on the internet and research we've done, which is as best we can say about it. But do not make an investment advice on this, what we just talked about, because we don't know what we're talking about beyond what we're talking about. My
money's in a mattress that's buried in my backyard. So
the mattress is looking pretty good over the weekend. Luckily, I don't bank there, but it does make me second think, because I've been a Wells Fargo customer for a very long time, and they had their scandals, and I've sort of had this illusion that I want to maybe change my bank at some point, and so I've thought about others, and Silicon Valley Bank was not high on my list because they don't really have any branches near me, but it's definitely a local bank I would have thought about. And so now, now you're thinking, maybe I just want to stay with Wells Fargo, or maybe I want to move to Chase, or maybe I want to move to another big national bank that I don't have to worry about failing. Maybe that's the right way to go. So, it does definitely makes you think a little differently about some of this stuff.
Yeah. I mean, which bank do you choose, though? I mean, I in a way, I think perhaps they're all as bad as each other. Bank of America certainly is. But I mean, but what kind of message does it send to people who operate small banks, though, if they can go ahead and make these mistakes or deliberately put people's money at risk, knowing that the government will step in and bail them out? I mean,
this is the whole reason why Dodd-Frank exists, right? Is to prevent this from happening. That's why the fact that they, basically lifted the capitalization requirements of small regional banks after, Silicon Valley Bank poured a bunch of money into lobbyists to get into, the prior administration's ear to lift those regulations from Dodd-Frank. It just shows that was a mistake. That's a bad choice. And the regulations would have prevented a lot of this problem from happening.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yeah. This really had me looking into, I've banked at a credit union for quite a while, just because the banking institutions just sort of bother me. Because they're too woke. But yeah, so I just tried that. But I had to definitely look into because is a credit union at the same risk? Just because they're typically not a for-profit business doesn't necessarily mean that they don't have capital investments to cover their books and that kind of thing. So it's definitely something that it's good to pay attention to, because we do assume and we put a lot of trust in currency in general, which is all just a giant lie we all share. So,
yeah, the interesting thing about credit unions is they're not actually insured by the FDIC. They're insured by a different organization called the NCUA, which basically has the same stipulations, but the whole risk management system in a credit union is completely different. And so, but similar. So it makes it even more confusing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was, it's one of those things where I was like, I think this is different. It's not. This is still just as much risk as any other bank.
Yep. And in some ways more so because they have, they don't have typically the large portfolio books that, other banks do, or diversification in their expenses and stuff. So it's interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, the larger of a corporation or an entity you are, the more you can hedge, right? The more you can diversify and sort of cover all the bases. Any smaller entity is always going to suffer. So it's scary.
Agreed. All right, guys. I'll talk to you next week.
Yep. See you later. Have a good night.
See ya. Bye.